please subscribe and click that bell. Today our case takes us to Dundalk in County Louth. Dundalk is a town on the Castletown River which flows into Dundalk Bay on the east coast of Ireland. It is halfway between Dublin and Belfast and is close to the border of Northern Ireland. In the 80s and 90s, being in proximity to the border, on the Republic of Ireland side, the town was regularly used for IRA activities, such as smuggling, the concealing of illegal weapons, and a hiding place for individuals wanted in connection to crimes in Northern Ireland. The town was widely seen as lawless and was known locally as El Paso. I tell you this as to describe the scene of life in Dundalk in the mid-90s, when a young girl, Ciara Breen, snuck out of her mother's house in the early hours on the morning of the 13th of February 1997 and was never seen again. Dundalk today is a totally different town. It is known for its vibrant nightlife and great social scene, the Spirit Store being one of Ireland's top music venues. The landscape of Louth is full of rich heritage, leaving behind medieval castles, monasteries and high crosses by St. Patrick, Fionn McCool, Cromwell, the Vikings and the Normans. Ciara Breen was 17 years old when she lived with her mother, Bernadette, in a small terraced house on Bachelor's Walk in Dundalk. This house was a 2-storey front-facing street house. They had both moved there a year before Ciara went missing. They had moved from Bernadette's parents' house, where they had been living since Bernadette's breakup of her relationship with Ciara's dad. Upon the breakup in the mid-80s, Ciara's dad moved to America and had no relationship with her. Once Ciara and her mother Bernadette moved to this house, which was just around the corner from her parents' house on St. Mary's Street, they became even closer. They would often stay up late at night chatting. Even when Bernadette was tired and went to bed, Ciara would climb in beside her to continue the chat until they both fell asleep. Then, in the middle of the night, Ciara would wake up and go into her own bed. Ciara was described by her tutor as shy, not very streetwise, not necessarily gullible, but she did have a trusting nature. She was bullied as a child, and Bernadette said that she suffered from low self-esteem, and so to cheer her up she took her on holiday to Disneyland in Florida. On their return, Ciara seemed to be more settled in herself and began to make friends. But these were friends that Bernadette would not have picked for her daughter. She spoke to Ciara about these friends, but Ciara was the type to see the good in everyone. And as I said already, poor Ciara was not very streetwise. She did run away once to Northern Ireland with a friend, but returned after a few days of her own accord. Despite having some normal teenage problems in the years before she disappeared, Ciara had largely calmed down and was well settled in herself by the summer of 1996. In 1997, she enrolled herself in a local education centre in the hope of developing skills that would help her find employment. She also had an interest in beauty and hoped to pursue this as a career. Her mother said at the time she went missing she still had suffered from low self-esteem, especially when it came to her teeth. And like any good parent, she booked Ciara in to have this problem resolved. As it was also coming up to Ciara's 18th birthday in March 1997, her mother also booked a second trip to Disneyland as a present for her. During this time though, Bernadette had some health issues to contend with, and on the morning Ciara went missing, she was to get results from a biopsy from the Black Rock Clinic in Dublin, and it was said by Bernadette that Ciara was worried for her, and they had discussed it the night before. So I don't think, knowing what her mother was facing, she would have left and never intentionally not returned. On Thursday, the 12th of February 1997, it was just another normal day in the Breen household. Bernadette and Ciara went out to a local restaurant called the Roma, which was situated on Park Street in Dundalk. After finishing their dinner, the two made their way home. They settled in for the night, Ciara watching Home and Away on TV, while Bernadette did a few bits and pieces around the house. By the time Bernadette had finished her housework, they both settled in front of the fire to watch Circle of Friends, which they had recorded on VCR, followed by a movie called Bad Boys. After the movies were over, Bernadette and Ciara got into one of their long chats, which progressed to the bedroom. After a while, Ciara went to her own bedroom, telling her mother at the bedroom door before she left, "Night night, I love you, and I'll see you in the morning." During the night, Bernadette woke up to use the bathroom at around 2 a.m. and popped her head inside Ciara's bedroom door to check in on her, but the room was empty. Presuming she had gone back downstairs to watch more TV, Bernadette went downstairs to the living room, and again it was empty. She searched the rest of the house, but still there was no sign of Ciara. On checking the house, Bernadette noticed the living room window slightly open, and she had been sure that all the windows were closed and locked when she had gone to bed. Ciara had been known to sneak out of the house in the past, but it had become more frequent in recent weeks. But she always returned. Bernadette had many a row over this with Ciara and tightened the reins on her to keep her safe. Ciara had to be picked up and dropped off whenever she was going anywhere. She had to phone Bernadette before she left for school and when she got home. If Ciara didn't do this, well then, she wouldn't be allowed out over the weekend. But this didn't stop Ciara, as when Bernadette was asleep, she would still sneak out of the house. To me, from listening to Bernadette in interviews, she really did her best for her daughter. On the night Ciara went missing, Bernadette settled herself in the armchair, watching the window Ciara had snuck out of, waiting to see that leg coming through the window on Ciara's return. But it never came. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Bernadette rang the Blackrock Clinic to cancel her appointment, but the receptionist told her the consultant really needed to see her. Bernadette left the house early for her appointment and hoped that by the time she returned, Ciara would be home. By the time Bernadette got home from Blackrock, she told her dad, who had given her a lift, that Ciara had been missing since the night before, and she was hoping she would have returned by now and have the fire lighting and waiting for the news of her results. But that wasn't to be. The house was empty. By 6 p.m. that evening, Bernadette contacted the Gardaí to report Ciara missing. Bernadette is not only dealing with Ciara being missing, but also her biopsy results. It turned out poor Bernadette had cancer. Bernadette told the Gardaí that the clothes that Ciara had been wearing that day she went missing were not in the house. A black leather jacket, dark blue jeans, wine-coloured sweatshirt, and a unique t-shirt which had her own face printed on it. This t-shirt was worn as an undergarment. Ciara also had been wearing a square Mickey Mouse watch that had been bought on her previous trip to Disneyland. Ciara's money, clothes, credit union book and passport were all found in her room, so she took nothing with her, only the clothes on her back. Gardaí launched their investigation on the 14th of February. They quickly established Ciara's movements before the time she went missing and some things that had happened. It would only take a few days before Gardaí had a prime suspect, after receiving information from Ciara's friends. It was widely believed by Gardaí that Ciara had fallen victim to a local person from the Dundalk area. Ciara, according to her friends, had been in contact with an older man in the days before she disappeared. This same man was once chased from Ciara's front garden by her mother, who found him talking to Ciara. Bernadette had overheard this man asking Ciara, quote, if she was going with anyone. This obviously raised alarm bells for Bernadette, and she told him to get lost and that he was far too old for her daughter. Friends of Ciara also told Gardaí that the suspect had been watching Ciara and the group of teenagers at a fast food restaurant a few days before she vanished. This was not the first time he had been spotted by the teenagers watching them. He had also approached them previously and was widely seen as a creep by the teenagers. Whilst in the restaurant on one occasion, the suspect was seen in deep conversation with Ciara by her friends. The same friends overheard him asking her, quote, if he could see her later, and she replied, I'll sneak out of my house when my mother goes to bed. Gardaí over the years would recheck their account, and it always remained the same as it did in 1997, leaving Gardaí little doubt of their account of these disturbing events. In 1998, Ciara's case was upgraded to murder. It was obvious to Gardaí that Ciara had not just run away, and numerous reports of sightings of her days and weeks after she vanished were checked and eliminated from the inquiry. What strikes me here is how quick the Gardaí in Dundalk, under the supervision of Pat Murray, were to upgrade Ciara's case to murder. I know cases I have covered of missing persons that are up to 30 years old and are still not being upgraded, even though evidence is constantly pouring in, and yet other families are left waiting. So whatever evidence the Gardaí had on Ciara's case must have been substantial, or the fact that Pat Murray was overseeing the investigation was probably a huge help. You that know me best know I have a bit of a graw for this man. Graw is Irish for love. But as soon as Ciara's case was upgraded, in 1999 it was moved from Dundalk to Dublin to the Operation Trace unit. Operation Trace was set up by Pat Byrne under public pressure from Mary Dullard and other families of missing people. Mary's sister Jojo had disappeared in 1995. Operation Trace was there to review women that had gone missing between 1993 and 1998. Its objective was, aside from solving the cases, was to try and establish if a serial killer was involved in any of the cases. This unit also worked alongside other operations, including paedophilia and links to predator rings of young children and teenagers at the time in Dundalk. In doing so, a man named Liam Mullen was put on the Gardaí's radar and became their chief suspect in the disappearance of Ciara. At the time Ciara disappeared in 1997, Mullen was 35 years of age. He had worked as a mechanic from a very young age. He had one son and he worshipped his mother. He was a DIY enthusiast and could turn his hand to anything. In 1997, he lived on Bachelor's Walk, just yards from Ciara's home, and was more than twice her age. Mullen, a carer for an elderly relative, was formally arrested on the 10th of September 1999. He refused under caution to answer any questions about the disappearance of Ciara. He told Gardaí that he only knew Ciara to say hello. Mullen was released without charge, and Operation Trace kept a close eye on the case for years to come. To me, this case should never have been moved to Dublin. As I explained, the uniqueness of Dundalk as a border town in the 80s and 90s. There were eyes and ears everywhere, and everyone knew everyone and what they got up to. Resolving this case stood with the people of Dundalk, and it was said that there was no way a stranger would enter the town to abduct a young teenager without standing out. The IRA would have been prominent in the town, and no one got past them at this time. The chief suspect, Mullen, would have been better investigated by local Gardaí who knew the lie of the land for sure. Another aspect that went against this case, among others, was that Operation Trace seemed to be led by the media, especially when the media established the term the Vanishing Triangle, which covered missing women in the Leinster area, and also by introducing the prospect of there being a serial killer in Ireland. Many cases that were put under the umbrella of the Vanishing Triangle took away the core investigation by not continuing to be looking closer to home and to the people associated with each individual case. Poor Bernadette hadn't even been informed that Ciara had been included in the Vanishing Triangle. She had been sitting at home when it came on the news, and Ciara's name was the last name called out to be included. Suddenly, Ciara's disappearance was national news. When Bernadette reached out to Dundalk Garda Station about what she had seen on the news, they turned up on her doorstep. They told her, quote, "Unfortunately, Mrs. Breen, Ciara is no longer yours. She's ours and everybody else's." And Bernadette's answer to that was, quote, "Don't ever bet on that one because you'll lose." In 2014, a Crime Call National TV Alert piece was put together on the 15th of December, asking the public for help on Ciara's disappearance. Gardaí had received an anonymous letter 5 weeks earlier, detailing and naming Liam Mullen by a witness as involved in the case of Ciara disappearing. In total, the Gardaí received 2 such letters, who they deemed as coming from the same person, and naming Mullen in the second letter also. Details were checked and verified, along with interviewing his ex-girlfriends at the time, who verified that Mullen was in a relationship with Ciara and that she was one of several teenagers he was having a relationship with at that time. In 2015, on the 21st of April, Mullen was arrested again and brought into Drogheda Garda station for questioning. While he wept about his situation, he once again refused to answer any questions about Ciara and his relationship with her, even though he had said in previous interviews he only knew her to say hello. He was released without charge again because Ciara's body had still not been found. On the 18th of August 2015, there was a search conducted at Balmer's Bog behind McCardle's Brewery off Ashley Road in Dundalk. The search came about due to details given in one of the anonymous letters to Gardaí. The letter stated that Mullen was seen in the early hours of the 13th of February chasing Ciara along the railway tracks. The bog was 17 acres, but financial resources only covered 2 acres, so Gardaí picked the area they thought best to find Ciara's body. Pat Murray still feels to this day that this is where Ciara is, but because of the bog being used as a dumping ground over the years, it is likely that even if Ciara is there, she will never be found. The search was concluded on the 9th of September, without any body being found. Locals would report that Mullen would turn up at the site during the search, and Gardaí also noted his presence. By now, Senior Detective Pat Murray was frustrated with the case, and he ordered that all files relating to Ciara was handed over by the Operation Trace team. They were happy to do so, as many of the detectives originally on the case were now retired and Operation Trace was being disbanded. But what was discovered in doing this was that many files, including Ciara's and many others, that were private and confidential were found in the homes, attics and sheds of former senior Garda investigators who were allowed to take away critical case files and evidence from their operating offices without proper job log case file tracking. To me, this is beggar's belief, and yet I'm not surprised. This was common practice in the 80s, 90s and 2000s. If a case went to court under these circumstances, a chain of evidence could be challenged. This stupidity to me is beyond comprehension. Senior investigator Pat Murray was not impressed regarding Ciara's case. He said, quote, "I eventually had to go back to the original investigation team and ask them to do a bit of searching. Lo and behold, it turned up in the attic of a retired Garda. That kind of slipshod approach always drove me insane, but as ever, I had to put that one to the side and get on with reviewing the case." In July 2017, Mullen, now 55, was arrested and detained due to a drink driving charge in Dundalk on an evening at around 8:30 p.m. Unbeknownst to Gardaí, Mullen had taken drugs beforehand. By 10 p.m. that night, he had become ill and a doctor was called. The doctor tried to resuscitate him but was unsuccessful, and he died in Dundalk Garda station from an overdose that same night. In 2018, on the 18th of June, Bernadette passed away peacefully at Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda, never knowing what happened to her daughter Ciara. After covering the case of Sandra Collins, which I must re-edit due to copyright, I find a lot of similarities with Ciara's case. They were both young and impressionable girls who I think were taken advantage of by older men, and I would include Imelda Keenan in this also, as she was dating an older man. Just my opinion, so don't come for me. The three of them were shy, naive and vulnerable in a way, used by far older men that were known to them or who they were dating. As Larry Murphy relates to the Vanishing Triangle, I would safely say from what I heard about Dundalk back in the 90s, he would not have got away with it and wouldn't have lasted too long around Dundalk. This was local, and while Mullen was never convicted, Pat Murray said the only thing that stopped him from being convicted was the body of Ciara was never found. Locals know what happened that night. Mullen knew what happened that night, in my opinion, but he has taken that truth to the grave. Mullen was afforded a grave and a final blessing, which is more than Ciara has got. Ciara's surviving family still wait to do the same for her. Bernadette's brother Pat continues to campaign for information, leading to Ciara's coming home and finally being laid to rest with her mother, who never gave up on her until she was taken also. Let's hope they are together once again, if not on this earth but in heaven. Rest in peace, Ciara and Bernadette.